everybody. Welcome back to the Blathering and the Blathering Conversations. I'm Ken Napzok. And as you can see on screen, a clone of me and I am a clone of him is here. Dan Larson from Secret Galaxy is here. Dan, we're going to start right away by confirming we are different people.
Yes, I was actually going to say, if it wasn't for this line down the middle of the screen, our backgrounds almost merge also.
This is fantastic. As long as, we also have a mutual friend, Jeff May. And though he is about a foot taller than me, when he grows a beard, it's similar too.
I got you. I think we're the same height. I hung out with him not too long ago, and I think he and I are about the same height.
Oh, really? Are you a tall, strapping lad? Is that what you are?
Yeah, I'm 6'3", yeah.
God, see? I always, it's the old newsman when you see the newsman. I'm about 5'10", I don't push it higher than that because it seems like I'm lying. But I love when people are like, dude, I saw you have legs and feet. It's great.
Yeah.
Dan has been the face of a YouTube channel for a long time. A lot of you listening probably already know. A lot of you listening to me either have heard me reference it or you should at this point, and that's part of why I'm crossing over with here, Dan, or Dan's crossing over here. Secret Galaxy, which used to be called Toy Galaxy, but I think it's a smart rebranding to go to Secret Galaxy. Dan, how do you describe it? Is it nostalgia-based documentaries about everything about my youth, or what?
Yeah, that's basically it. It's pop culture documentaries. I guess that's the best word. I haven't really elevator pitched it in a while, so that's about it. We tend to stick between late 70s, at the latest early 2000s. We've tried to go past like 2010 a couple of times, and we're just not that audience. Nobody wants to listen to their dad or their granddad talk about the cartoons they grew up with. Like they know more about it than I do. So it's but yeah, we used to be strictly, toys, cartoons, comics, but we've been able to branch. And that was the rebranding, was allowing us to branch out into other stuff. We've covered things like choose your own adventure books, and, various movies and all kinds of other things that may not have fit previously.
Which, again, I think real smart rebranding and YouTube, where you can get locked into something and even just trying something new will, absolutely destroy your channel. I've had that experience. Like, hey, we're Star Wars. We're going to talk about James Bond. No one? Okay. Thank you.
Nope. It's tough. Because sometimes the audience is willing to go with you, but the algorithm isn't. And then it also works the opposite way. The algorithm is fine, and your audience is like, this isn't what I come to you for.
How do you guys over there? What is it? It's a 2-man team?
That's it. Since day one. Yep.
Nice. Gosh, that's great. How do you choose, develop, put together? I've been fascinated by your workflow.
Previously when it was more of a toy centric thing, I've always been the toy and comics and cartoons expert. That's just what my interests always were since I was a kid. And that's what made Greg and I a real good team. Is I had the sort of trivia and nerd knowledge and all of that stuff, and the enthusiasm for the just silly things. And he really wanted to run a channel and be behind the scenes and have no one know who he was or anything like that. And he just sort of wanted to program it. So earlier on, it used to be like, what do you want to do this week? You want to talk about this action figure? You want to talk about that show, whatever. But then as the channel sort of started to grow, he became more of a program manager and started to pick and choose based, a little bit more on the numbers. Where should we go? What should we do? What is the audience responding to? And he was ruthless in his ability to cut segments that just weren't working. It could have been something I was very passionate about, and he could say, this just isn't working for us. We need to cut it and put more time into the things that are working. I learned to trust him over time because he seemed to know what he was doing, and it worked out well for us. Now, most of the channel programming is through him. I don't even know what we're working on, until I'm like sat there in front of the research, and it's like, okay, now we're doing this. So again, I trust him implicitly.
Wheels you up. It's like that. What's that scene in Roxanne where the hot hunk is getting Steve Martin to write the letter to Daryl Hannah, and he's just like, "I'll take care of the fish." You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, exactly. And there'll be times too where he'll have the schedule, planned out 2-3 months in advance. And I'm expecting a certain topic to come up now that it's actually on there. And then he'll, right at the last second be like, nope, I changed my mind. We're doing something else. I'm like, oh, okay. Yes, sir. Whatever you need.
Everything you're describing, it's a great pairing. That's probably why it's working so well and gone. So how long have you guys been in operation?
It is January as we record this. Yeah. April will be our 10-year anniversary.
That's crazy. No, that's
2015. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was telling you off air. I was a pretty early subscriber. I think your numbers seem to be around the 20,000 mark. So that probably doesn't get me any kind of like gold star in a membership program.
If
But
I had any to give you out,
thank you.
I'd
I just
happily put it in the mail
I
for you.
would just want some of the rare muscle figures that I got rid of at a garage sale
Nice,
years ago.
nice.
Um, yeah, you all have it's been a great story of growth and consistency and finding your voice. And I don't want this entire interview just to be a tell me about Secret Galaxy. So one of my final things is I love your delivery style. It is unique. It is your own voice. It's got a great rhythm to it. Even the airs and outtakes are you and your voice. What was your entertainment experience before this?
Absolutely none. Zero.
That's great.
0.0. I have nothing. No training, no nothing, no whatever. It literally was just Greg and I both were, creative people. I was mostly doing comics, freelance illustration, that kind of stuff. He
Mm,
was doing graphic design. He had always wanted to make some kind of film, get into filmmaking, video, television, something, whatever. But we're both from we're both from New Hampshire, and there's nothing going on out here. There's no scene out
let's
here.
talk toys.
And
Yeah.
even now, like we try to do things. There's just nothing. We're like reaching down to Boston, like anybody, please, is there anybody who wants to be in a thing? And there's nobody here. So,
Man.
we sort of found each other through mutual interests,
Mm,
and it worked out. We started making little short film things.
yeah.
Because I wanted to learn, I wanted to sort of explore that part of life and performance and whatever, and see if that was something I could do. I'm sure
Mm.
if I went to a therapist, they'd say there's some ego involved in that. You're very self-centered.
Yeah. I always throw the or paraphrase a Bono quote. If anyone needs to get up on stage in front of 70,000 people every night, there's a hole in your soul.
Yeah.
So as a stand-up comic, I could attest to the fact that we're all searching. No, it's a someone who has been in the business for a long time, 25 years. You could find a lot of channels if you do a search about, hey, here's the history of this, here's the history of that. The difference is going to be obviously the research how it's presented, but I think your style, it just immediately pulls you in. It's you. It really has that friend at a bar type of vibe. So kudos.
That's from day one. Our sort of this was our big strategy, right? I mean,
Okay.
this is one hot tip to make you a successful YouTube channel.
Top strats with Dan Larson, everybody. Top strats.
This secret they don't want you to know. I was so I would do the research and then I would write. It's a little different now. We both
Mm.
kind of do our parts of the research, but my goal, my only goal, was to try to make Greg laugh.
Yeah.
And back in the beginning, he didn't see the script before we shot it. He
Oh.
was coming in cold, so he was set up the camera and was like action, and so he's hearing it for the first time, and I know the jokes are coming. I got the delivery ready. I know what I'm
Yeah.
going to say, and I can't wait. You know how it is.
Yeah.
As a comic, you've done those things. You're like energized by that. Oh, it's coming. I'm setting it up. He doesn't know. I'm about to drop it on.
Eh.
And then once he was in the edit, he's trying to do the same thing to me. He's trying to put in these non sequiturs. He's trying to put in these references, these sound effects, these on screen hits that he doesn't care if anybody else in the world gets them,
Mm.
as long as I laugh.
Mm.
And so it just became this one-on-one, very personal, intimate thing where I was like, if I can make him laugh, if he can make me laugh, then other people are probably going to laugh too.
I love that you've got
You
kind of a Bill Hader, John Mulaney writing sketches like I'm going to make Hader crack type of vibe, but
Yeah.
it's both ways. It's both ways.
Exactly.
I love that. We joked up top. I think it was my buddy Ken Plume on Blue Sky who one day you posted something and like I said, I was a fan to a point of like I don't want to bother this guy. I'm not going to DM him and everything. And then we just started interacting maybe even more on Blue Sky. But Ken Plume was like, you guys are both the same. And what it's the beard, it's the little gray. Well, I have a little more gray now poking through. But we are of a certain age and a certain genre of white straight suburban kid. Well, I don't want to assume anything about anyone here actually.
That's all correct.
I don't
You
know.
nailed me.
I don't know about your wild college years, Dan. But that tends to I don't know. It carries a stigma. It carries and I'm not even jumping straight to the bad stuff. It just we have the comic shop guy vibe. And have you?
Yes.
Do you agree with that? And have you had to? How do you overcome
I'll
that?
take that a step. I'll take that a step further and say I have the white male pop culture guy.
Yeah.
In that, I think a big barrier to people finding us and giving themselves an opportunity to like our videos is because they immediately see what our topic is. Oh, this guy's talking about Star Wars. I ain't getting into all that. These
Yep.
these guys that look like that talking about Star Wars, I already know what's coming out of their mouth,
Yep.
like it is a tough stigma, that it's a stereotype, and it's mostly true.
It's
Kind of
mostly
how I
true.
want to say it, but
Yeah, I have a little reference in one of my stand-up bits about knowing I have resting Republican podcaster face, and
nice.
it coming from the Star Wars podcast world, which I'm still part of with Force Center and everything. Like we try so hard. I mean, I want to say we even try. No, that's not true. We don't try hard to not be that. We just aren't that.
Exactly.
But it is something we have to work through. But we're and I'm not rushing straight at any politics or anything like that. I want to get into some of the depth that's in your videos. I was just watching the latest X-Men one, which I don't know. Turns out I don't know if people know this, X-Men might have some meaning as it was born in the civil rights era. I don't know.
Scratching a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. But it wasn't always, I didn't grow up watching Robotech's my favorite thing in the 80s in terms of animation. I don't grow up thinking, Roy and Claudia were an interracial couple and I just love these characters. It was later on to appreciate that. How did your love start of this stuff? Just natural suburb, pop culture love, and how has it grown?
Child of the 80s, same as everybody else in this sort of demographic. The crush of all the advertisements and commercialization and consumerism and all that stuff, absolutely inescapable at that age, at that time. And so for me, my mom was a bit of a science fiction, fantasy buff. She definitely was buying us comic books and watching Battlestar Galactica. And, I didn't have any money. So any of those toys and stuff were coming, from her.
Yeah.
But, I don't think any parents at that time were thinking that like, oh, this is so egregious and so excessive that it's going to, distort reality for these kids and stuff. It was just cool things, cool robots. And like you said, I remember being in high school when we were reading, I don't even remember what we were reading. Lord of the Rings, maybe. It was Hobbit at some point. And, you start to get into that critical analysis and the breakdown of, well, what does this really represent? What is this really about? And I just remember being so frustrated and be like, it's just about hobbits. It's not about anything. Like, can't it just be about elves and orcs and magic swords and stuff? Can't it just be about Wolverine's claws? Isn't that enough?
Yep.
And it's not until you have that sort of age and distance and a little bit more, experience and education that you go, oh, there is some stuff there.
Well, and I always joke that I was maybe 1 or 2 turns away from being an angry car guy on YouTube. And what that to me means is when we started, digital media kind of started to explode in 2012 is when I really started first working with it, producing the Schmoes No movie podcast and all that stuff. Part of it was to treat it as that, not in any nefarious way. That was just what it was. We're debating our favorite Batman, Keaton or Bale. That was it. It was silly. And to dig deeper, we knew that there clearly was stuff connected with us and whatnot. But I think there was moments I had along the way where I was like, I am starting to realize I can't ignore what this stuff means. Doesn't mean we can't enjoy the pew pew pew, because yes, I chose Star Wars over so many other things because of the cool toys, because of the lightsabers, because of the blasters. Once you start seeing it there, and it was a little bit later for me. It was late 20s, 30s, where I was like, oh, I can't ignore this anymore. Did you have any specific moment along your way that you were like, I still want to talk about the toys, but I know there's stuff going on here?
I don't know if there's any specific, sort of aha moment where that happened. What you started to touch on, which I was absolutely going to relate to, was
dive in.
I am glad the internet and social media and everything did not exist when I was 18, 19, 20. Yeah. In college, like I got my first email address as I was sort of leaving college at age 22. So it wasn't really a thing yet. And I wake up in a cold sweat thinking about just the stupid, awful, angry suburban white kid things I would have posted online because somebody had, the something wrong about Bionic 6, I would just lost my mind. What are you talking about? I would have been one of those people. And I'm so thankful that I was older when all of this stuff started to happen, and much older when we started the channel.
Yeah. Unfortunately, some of I wake up every day. I'm not on Facebook actively, but I still have an account. We'll see if that continues going forward. We'll see. It's been a long week already. But I'll check every day for the memories, those little Facebook memories, just to make sure that I didn't post something.
And I'll even go a step further on that is I think having the channel and being a sort of name on social media and
Yeah.
whatever, as we started to do our videos early in, so 2015 into 2016, you start to see what other people are saying. You start to get a sense of what other channels are doing, what they're talking about, how they're handling this material. And, Greg has always been very objective about this stuff. He doesn't care about any of it. To him, it is just, he has his interests were more like horror movies and television based. I'm really more, like I said, the comics and cartoons and stuff. And, it really forced me to look at the way I treated this stuff and how precious I was with it,
Mm.
when I started to see other people's sort of overreactions and
Yeah.
over preciousness
Yeah.
to things,
Yeah, and I would have. Yeah, that's some of it too. Where I don't even think it has to run straight towards political or social issues. They're definitely there.
No,
They're definitely going to be
no.
part of the conversation. But what you're just talking about too, I quote a friend of mine, Adam Witt the Movie Guys podcast, a lot of we were in a bar one night as adults in our 40s talking about Star Wars, and he said, obviously I'm a big Star Wars guy. He goes, in 1999, our generation, the first chance we got, tried to destroy Star Wars for the next generation.
Yeah.
Which does not mean you have to love the prequels, everything. I've grown to love them immensely, especially in the current political climate. But it was just one of those things that hit me real hard. I was part of that. I was part of that.
Same. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
I wanted to burn the passion out of the kid. I remember talking to my 7-year-old cousin. I love the Phantom Menace. Jar Jar is my favorite character, and I was like, I got to squash this kid's dreams.
Yeah. You couldn't just let him have it. Yeah.
What? Go ahead.
I fully relate to that 100%. And Star Wars is a really good example of, something that had become practically religion, to me. That was all through those college years, watching them on VHS every single day, quoting them, knowing them inside and out.
Yeah.
And then, now that finally the prequels are coming. They've been teasing this for my entire life. All I've ever known is Star Wars. And now the prequels are finally coming out. And then they hit and you're just like, what was that? What was that? And it's been maddening to see, our generation went through the take it away from George Lucas, take it away from him. He shouldn't be, he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't even understand Star Wars anymore. Take it away from him. To watch it come around and have a whole generation say, you got to give it back. He's the only one who understands it.
Yep.
Yep.
And then you have, I don't want to get into a generational debate if Gen Z jumps in, but then you have sometimes the younger generation who's just like, why can't we all just love things like we love the prequels? I'm like, oh, no. Oh, no.
But I can appreciate all of it just for what it is now. I feel like I have reached that point of, you sort of you're just coasting on through life now going like, hey, you like that thing? I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy you're happy.
Yes.
You know what? It's not my favorite thing. It's not for me. I have completely changed the way I talk about this stuff.
Yes.
It's not for me. Did you like it? It's not for me,
I've worked really hard in all areas, not just Star Wars, an area I cover and love quite a bit, but just anything pop culture, anything music, and opening myself up to it does Chappell Roan write music for me? No, but there's something to connect with. And I'm being open to it. And instead of mocking it as a generational, old guy kind of like it's there for me, that's just one example of many things of, I don't know, Star Wars. The key to Star Wars, one of the core things of Star Wars is generational exchange and generational, the passing of the baton. This is not my fight. It's yours. And so at one point, once the gray really came in, it was like, that's kind of, you mentioned earlier, like looking around how other people talking about it is like, I don't like the way they're talking about it. Again, it isn't about like or dislike. It's about how you're discussing it. I don't want to be part of that. At a certain
point, you reach an age and sort of experience level, and this can happen at any point. It can happen to you at 18. It can happen at 22. It doesn't have to be at like 40 or anything.
Yeah.
But you start to say, who am I? What is my identity? Do I have an identity beyond the things that I like? Is that what defines me, my opinion about Star Wars?
Yeah.
And that feels real shallow.
Yeah.
That feels real. You need to spend some more time doing some other things and having some life experiences,
I agree with that.
You're taking it a little too seriously.
Jumping back a bit, though, I want to go back to the 80s. What were some of your actual favorite things? And then we can dive into them even a little bit more, or the depth of them.
All the stuff.
Star Wars,
G.I. Joe, Transformers, all that stuff. All those 80s cartoons, the toy shows. I watched them all, except for Robotech. My friends were really into Robotech.
Yeah?
Robotech and Thundercats, for whatever reason, just missed me. They just missed me.
And then you watched it and didn't get it, or you just didn't even connect with it?
I literally think it missed me. I think it was on at a time on a channel that I just never saw it. And so, my friends would be like, Robotech, Robotech, Robotech. And I'd be like, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, how many episodes? When is it on?
Yeah.
Like, so it just wasn't something I ever connected with. And same with Thundercats. I remember like it was on at like 6:30 in the morning. And so I'd be like on my way out to catch the bus to go to school. I'd have enough time to watch the opening theme.
Yeah.
And then I was out the door. So I never saw a full episode. So it never really got ingrained with me.
Thundercats, I didn't connect with. Never really have. And years ago, one of my friends got cast in the reboot, and we were hanging around, and they said, "Oh, he's this character." And I just kind of went, "Awesome! Is that what? What is that? Is that?" And they're like,
"Guy was it?"
They're like, "It's the lead. It's the guy." And I'm like, "Oh, the Thundercat, yeah." But
Mr. Thundercat, yeah,
Mr. Thundercat. That's great. Good for you. But Robotech, that's fascinating to hear. I almost don't want to ask these questions. It ruins my image of you, Dan. I couldn't wait. I was like, couldn't wait till you got to Robotech. When I started watching, I was like, when this guy gets to Robotech, and it's great. You have a complete history of Robotech.
We've spent a lot of time on Robotech, and I'd be fine if we never touched it ever again.
That's okay. I rewatch it every now and then. It's a multi-rewatch for me.
Well, and so it's one of those things where I've told this story a million times. You've probably heard me tell it somewhere or mention it at some point. I lived in Japan, right? I lived in Japan from 80 to 82. My dad was in the Navy. I was like 5 years old when we moved there. I was 7 when we left. This is a very formative age for all this crap to just put its hooks in you and stay there.
Yeah.
And so when I was in Japan, it was Macross. Like I moved to the US with a Valkyrie already in my possession.
See,
so I had Voltron, I had GoBots, I had all of that stuff already. I had Transformers already. So I get to the US and everybody's like, "Oh, look at all this stuff. Dan's the coolest guy." And I was like, "I just have toys,
Like
that makes me cool."
Finally have some social currency. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Finally breaking through at age 7. Like,
and I'm still to this day kind of the annoying kid that's like, I like Robotech, and people are like, "Oh, you like Macross?" I'm like, no, Harmony Gold's Robotech.
Robotech,
American. That's all. I'm the
different. Carl Masek forever. Yeah.
I drive past the Harmony Gold building every so once in a while on Sunset. I just kind of look over like, that's where it happened. Did you have? So Robotech is one thing, but that's big for me. I wasn't alone in that. Did you have a small specific love? For me, Mask. Mobile Armored Strike Command.
Love Mask. Yeah.
Popular, but it was a little bit less popular, but I was all in on it. Did you have one of those things?
Oh yeah, no, that was for sure. Like everybody watched G.I. Joe, everybody watched Transformers, all that stuff. And Mask was definitely one that I loved. It blew my mind because, at the time I did not understand how things were made. These shows existed to promote the toys, right? They're just commercials.
Right.
But I thought they made this really cool show, Mask, and now somehow these engineers and scientists and automotive technology people had to figure out how to make these transformable cars. And so when my friend was like, "There's Mask toys they're coming out soon," and I was like, "That's impossible. You can't do it. How would you do it?" Like, I own Megatron, I own Optimus Prime, and I'm like, "You can't do Mask car."
Yeah. God.
The logic of a 10-year-old,
Yeah. You can't give Miles Mayhem a vehicle. How can weigh?
How could you do that? Yeah. How can you make a car turn to have engines on the back and a helicopter turn into a jet? It's impossible.
Yeah. That's so funny, man. Yeah. Mask.
Those toys blew my mind.
Right. I can't remember his name, but I had the essentially Billy Idol riding a motorcycle guy.
Yeah. It was he was Vampire was the name of the motorcycle.
Yes.
And I will come up with the name of the driver in a second. Now I'm thinking all I can think of is Billy Idol.
It's had the snarl and everything. I had a few of them, but like that was my guy because we all had like my favorite Joe. I like Flint. I had a crush on Lady J, so I was a Flint guy. It was a Destro guy, but like my favorite Joe was Mainframe because I loved that there was a middle-aged computer tech on the team.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so in having conversations with people about like, oh, what, there's G.I. Joe Classified now as the 6-inch modern interpretations of all these old G.I. Joe characters. And it's like, well, who should they bring back? Who should they do next? And it's like, oh, well, Mainframe, but what would he do? Like, he couldn't have all that old computer equipment. And I'm like, yeah, no, keep him as that guy. Like, he's the retro tech guy, right? Like, he should come with a fold up, Tandy, whatever. Just keep him as that guy.
He was the only, I had, like a lot of kids had a ton of the figures. we were lower. We were a part of Reagan's lower middle class where the trickle did not trickle down. So I didn't have a lot of Joe vehicles, but I had a lot of figures. But Mainframe being, not a cool gun. I mean, I think he had something, but he came with that big old giant portable computer with like a floppy disk spot on it. It was the best.
Hey, I am eagerly awaiting today. Today's Tuesday. I've lost track. Today's Tuesday. My modern 6-inch classified GI Joe dial tone will be here on Friday. And talk about a guy with a code name that's made out of dead technology. What's a dial tone?
That's right. Forget about ruining any
good. I'm glad they kept that.
Yeah. yeah. Ruining any kind of plot with like just introduce a cell phone and the movie's over. You can't get rid of dial tone. One of the things over the years, as digital media exploded and I entered into it, and it was like suddenly, all those things I knew as a kid had value. All those things I could tell you about had value, or just my love of it had value. And it gave me a great start to a digital media career. You obviously experienced that as the channel grew. Was there any point that you kind of thought, I can't do this? This is not what an adult does? Because I'd always want to push back against that, but I had that feeling early on.
You know what? I think that was something that was always there for me, because my real dream, my real goal through college, through high school, through college, was I wanted to be a comic book artist. I wanted to make comics. I wanted to write and draw comics. And there has always, always, always been that stigma attached to comics, that comics are for kids. It's not legitimate art. It's trash art. It's disposable. It's all of this stuff. And so I was already immersed in that mindset of the thing I want to do the most in life is already considered something that is not legitimate. So, sidestepping into toys and talking about toys and all that other stuff, it was perfectly natural for me, especially considering that just before we started the channel, I had been a toy dealer. I had like shop space, and, I was selling online all the time. And so that was my livelihood. That was my primary source of income, was flipping collections, being on Craigslist, yard sales, auctions, doing all that kind of stuff, and really getting into the nuances of whose little black plastic gun is this?
Right. Which is great. Yeah. And it starts to get into the depth of it, where I always argue now, like, for my dad and his era, 50s, growing up 50s into 60s, like, his silly toys, his Stretch Armstrongs and everything, society told him to put it on the shelf. And he wanted to be a 2D artist and animator, and family and kids and responsibilities. And we all face it at one point, sure. But like, I always say our generation, is 70s into the 80s and beyond, we're the first generation where like that was our art, and good or bad. This beginning of it was toy books and commercials for toys, and it was capitalism on display every Saturday morning or after school. But that was our art, so it makes sense that we would be the generation to lead as others start to follow and maybe even improve on the conversations. That to talk about the meanings of it, to talk about what it means beyond even just the fun trivia. But this is what influenced us. We grew up with this. You did this to us, so we're going to keep talking about it.
Hey, look, the studies are starting to come out now. There's a really great book called The He-Man Effect by Box Brown. It's a little graphic novel.
Okay, I'm going to write this down.
Please, it really talks about how this sort of social experiment occurred, whether it was intentional or not. As soon as Reagan and Mark Fowler, FCC Chairman Mark Fowler, deregulate the industry, everything that the activist groups and the lobbyists and stuff were fighting against just crushed an entire generation of kids. And I can sit here all day long and say, but I love Wolverine and I love Optimus Prime and I love Voltron. It's like, well, how much of that was organic and how much of that was just literal brainwashing? Like, it was this was exactly what all those parents groups and stuff were worried about, was this distorting your perception of life and reality and commerce and capitalism and government and everything. It's like, do I understand what happened to me? Am I in control of it? I'm not sure anymore. At least I found a way to make a living off of it.
And to find some hope and to find the value. I mean, look, I still look at, as we say on Force Center, and my pal Joseph Scrimshaw has always said, George Lucas didn't start a nonprofit. So they made a lot of money on the toys and everything, but I at least think he had the right idea of what he was trying to say in the art. But going back and just kind of, seeing G.I. Joe as a giant recruitment show for military industrial complex
Well, and it's tough because you go, is it a recruitment for the military industrial complex, or is it a recruitment for Hasbro? Is it a recruitment for buying
Yeah.
toys? Because
Yes.
that's where the real money was made,
Absolutely.
and still is. And
Yes.
it's, we constantly have these conversations, Greg and I, about like, why is it the same brand? Why are we still making the same Transformers took root in the
Yeah.
80s? These things. Then why is it? Is it just because we're still the generation with disposable income? There's generations behind us that have come up, is obviously Ninja Turtles and,
Hmm.
Ghostbusters and all those franchises are sort of a part of that. But I think it has more to do with the fact that it was cut off at a certain point, like
Mm.
there was legislation came back in, the landscape of television changed. And while kids were still watching cartoons, it was not the market saturation
Mm.
effect that we grew up in the 80s. And so
Totally.
those legacy brands just never, we brought them back and we will not let them go away.
Yeah, and that gets into I don't think nostalgia has to be a bad word all the time, but it's definitely something to be discussed as a danger. But what you're talking about too, yeah, we were the generation that started getting the development jobs around town and starting to go, hey, that thing I loved, we're going to do that versus George basing so much of it on I'm not going to do Apocalypse Now. I couldn't get Flash Gordon. I'm going to do my own thing based on things I love.
Yes.
Now it's a different vibe. Yeah, so it sometimes seems like a rat caught in a circle or mouse spinning.
Well, and at this point, everything is about risk, right? Like
Yes.
everything is every decision by any of these giant mega corporations is a calculated risk.
Mm.
How much do we have to invest in this? What is the risk level? And if Disney
Yeah.
wants to reduce their risk to practically zero, yeah, go buy Marvel, go buy Star Wars, and just make those things forever and ever.
Yeah.
Because everybody's, love it or hate it, it is, man, does it get engagement? That's all that matters, right?
Yep. All you got to do is put some red eyes on your thumbnail, some arrows, and you're
Yeah,
good to
yeah,
go, right?
yeah, yeah.
Good to go. Um, in talking about what it means, one of my favorite videos of yours is pretty recent. It's the Monopoly one, where you take something pretty on the surface innocent in terms of it's ingrained in all of our child for many generations. The game Monopoly. You tell the real story. You tell the fascinating, but you took some big swipes on what the game became, how it started out as being. I don't know how to describe I didn't know that part of the game starting out, kind of being
Yeah,
a
the
lesson.
anti-landlord. It was called
Yeah,
the Landlord's Game, and it was developed as a way to teach people about the unfairness
yeah,
of landlords and property ownership and taxes and government. It wasn't about winning the game. It was about teaching a lesson. It was developed by a teacher, and she really wanted to make sure that people understood that, especially people who may not have had access to better education.
yeah.
This was a good way. And what ends up happening is the fun version of the game becomes this sort of version of the game where it is all about getting the most property and
Mm.
earning the most money and causing your friends to go bankrupt. And it just, this site it continues through the life of the game, and then comes back around. Like, I don't want to spoil the end
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
yeah,
video. That,
yeah, yeah. Go
but
watch it, everybody. Go watch it.
it's my job as a writer to find a way to make that a bigger story,
Mm.
more relevant to us today than just to be like, this game was invented 100 years ago by a lady
Yeah,
you've never heard of.
yeah. No, so when you come upon that, in discussing this stuff now, and when you come upon those kind of stories and the truth of the games, or the lessons in the cartoons or the lessons in the toys, how are you and Greg approaching that in terms of you guys strike a good balance of you're not preachy. If anyone follows you, they know who you are as a person, maybe politically and
Mm-hmm.
socially. You're very outspoken in a good, strong way, I think. How do you find that balance? Because that Monopoly one was it was my favorite, like I said, so far. Of just and you've so many great videos I love, but I was just
Yeah,
like this said something. How are
it's
you approaching that these days?
Yeah. Well, first, we're always trying to find stories that either haven't been told or stories that we can tell in our own way. Because, I mean,
Mm.
there's 150 different videos about Monopoly.
Yeah.
You can look up everybody. Everything's been covered.
Yeah.
Everything has been covered. Simpsons did it first, right? Like,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
everything's been covered. We're not bringing anything new to the table in that respect. All we can bring is our perspective and our interpretation of what happened. And we know that our demographic, our audience, is a little older.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of like
Mm-hmm.
us, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're an 80s kid, if you're a 90s kid, I'm sorry, but you're also 40, like at least. So
Yeah.
so we know that we can treat these things with a little bit more we can use bigger words. We can use we can make some political references, we can make some veiled references, and we can have some honest conversations, because we also know we're keeping it light, right? Those outtakes are in there, and I'm trying to make jokes about stuff. But we also know that there's already enough stuff that leans to the right on YouTube.
Yeah.
And enough criticism that doesn't really go deep enough and doesn't do any kind of analysis. And we want to be able to bring it. The thing that excites us the most about these is A, when we can find an interesting story like that we don't think anybody else has really told that way.
Yeah.
And B, if we can correct the record. Oh man, that's a thrill.
Yeah,
that is a thrill.
I can hear this in your voice. I hear the hands.
Exactly. Well, because like what we've found is that we didn't pick journalism. Like journalism picked us, right? Like we didn't want to do that. That's not what we set out to do. We're just making silly videos about Spider-Man and Optimus Prime in my living room and trying to make each other laugh with various fart jokes or references or whatever. But the way the channel grew, the way the audience steered us through their involvement, through their watching and through their subscribing, they pushed us in a certain direction to say, do more of this. We want to see more of this. And that's what we became. And now we really consider ourselves more journalists, historians and journalists more than anything else. So when those
100%.
topics come up, Greg couldn't give two craps about what do we do? This week we're doing Cops, the Hasbro toy line, Cops and Crooks. Had an animated series, 1 season, 65 episodes, animated series. He doesn't care about any of that, but if there's an interesting story in there, he wants to find it. And if there's a way to correct the record, if there's a way to bring up information, because if you've tried to research anything on the internet, you know that one person wrote an article 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and every single person since references that one article.
So true.
It might be wrong. It might be wrong. And nobody cares, because you're just like, I got to get my video up. So we have burdened ourselves with, the audience trusts us to get this stuff right. And so we love correcting the record. Oh, it's so great.
Dan, you have my trust. And you're also so right on that, having spent last year on a channel where I had to research a lot of things. And you're like going through like digital papers on your desk, and suddenly you're like, it's all the same interview from 1996. Yeah. They're all referencing this one person who, by the way, was a Holocaust denier, and no one's mentioning that.
Right. Like, there's no context for any of this. It's really just a he said.
Yeah.
And nobody knows who said the thing originally, and we can't do that anymore. And the more, I'm going to bring it back around now to contemporary issues, the more the world moves away from that with actual journalism, the more we feel like we have to stick with that. And it's getting harder and harder, because more and more all of these digital assets, all these archives, all these libraries and stuff that used to be there. Ken, what's the oldest thing you ever wrote on the internet, like as a scholarly thing? Any, like articles or anything?
2002, I wrote for a website called tinymixtapes.com. Music used to be music.
Is any of that stuff still up?
Nope.
See, it's gone. No. Like, where is it? Maybe the Internet Archive has it, but they're trying to take that down now.
Right.
Because nobody wants to have a historical record of this stuff anymore. And so it's getting harder and harder. And so we really feel that responsibility to make sure we make that extra effort to get it right.
Hot damn, I'm inspired by what you're doing now. Seriously. Seriously.
It's not like, that's what we're trying to bring to it. Like, we're trying to be something a little bit different. Fun, yes. Educational, sure, but also responsible.
It's absolutely working. Absolutely working. God, that's fascinating. God, you're scared me. But it's like, when we're all gone, like, what archaeologist is gonna come around and dig up phones and servers? I have no proof anyone here existed. It's gone.
No, I have too many friends now. I have too many associates and stuff that I have met, and maybe I've never met them in person. I've never met you in person, but I've become friendly with, and writers especially, who say, I did 12, 15 years worth of work, and that website is gone now. There's no record of it anywhere. I reached out to somebody for the video we're writing this week to say, hey, you worked at that magazine at the time. It was the website for the magazine. And I said, you are the person who wrote this interview. And only one of the 3 pages is in Internet Archive. We can't find the other 2 pages. Is there a hard drive? Do you have that email? Is that thing still out there? Can we find that? And the answer was no. So, unfortunately,
That's weirdly scary. I haven't. I know I had this conversation with my buddy Ken Bloom, like you said, who you know as well through the internet, and we were talking about this very thing because he was been a writer since the dawn of the internet, and it's just unless you have it, it's gone. So yeah, this means Secret Galaxy, folks. You got to watch, listen, and support because they're preserving our history.
We're trying.
Okay.
There's a lot of books that are coming out now. You know, our generation is also starting to say, hey, you know what? And this has been happening for like the last decade. The people who made these things originally, the writers, the directors, the artists and stuff, they're a generation ahead of us. And so they're starting to reach the end of their lives.
Yeah.
And so there is this sort of, scramble to document their stories, to interview them, to do the books, how Masters of the Universe was made, how G.I. Joe was made, and really document these things. And I had someone who's doing the Power Rangers book reach out and say, hey, can you read this, and do a blurb? And what I told him, and it was genuine, it was like, I'm just so happy that there's a physical record of this now.
Yes.
Like the internet could burn tomorrow, but your book is going to be out there.
No, those are great points. Yeah. And that's why, and it goes back to what I was saying too, of just like, it is fun and fluff. And again, if you want to engage on, Luke and Vader have a cool fight, great. If you also want to engage on, George was saying in 1983, the true warrior throws down his weapon, and, in an era of Sly Stallone, Arnie, and little Mark Hamill throwing down a lightsaber, you can approach it in two different ways, but I just love analyzing it and on that way, because it was how and what we grew up with. And I think that's important.
Modern mythology, yes.
Yeah. And it's
shared experiences. We talk about that a lot in our show, shared experiences, and how a lot of the fracturing of media and culture is because we don't have these shared experiences anymore.
I love, I'm all about moving forward and all about trying, new things. Though I did just have a job interview with an AI robot that I never want to experience again. It was really freaky because 2 minutes in, you forget you're talking to a program. And I had a 15-minute conversation with this thing. The future is freaky, but I do think there's something about the water cooler stuff and the shared culture. I call it the shared unique experience, where I grew up thinking I'm the only one who loves that line in Star Wars by insert glup shitto of a character.
Yeah,
and then you find out no, you're one of 2 million, but you all thought you were one. But that's part of the power, and it's not there anymore.
Every time that comes up, am I the only one who remembers? You're not the only one who remembers. You're on the internet. You're not the only one who remembers.
I mean, I mentioned mask or muscles. It's like garbage bag. I mean, of course, everyone, but just for a long time.
They sold millions of those things.
It's crazy. The muscles things. I still don't know how. I watched your episode. I still don't know how or why they existed. They're just one of my favorite toys that shouldn't exist. Crazy. I mentioned you've been on usually your personal social media. You've been I don't know if outspoken is even the right word, but you've just spoken your truth about politics and points of view and what's going on in the world as the world just continues to spin wildly out of control. Though I argue it probably always was. We just know about it more, and it's a little more vibrant and in your face. And how have you found that working alongside what you do? You're obviously you guys tell a story. And you meaning the journalism side of it, but I really used to keep. Let me back this up. I'm failing I'm failing in my interview tonight. I used to be pretty apolitical growing up because why not? I was a white kid in the suburbs. I didn't have to worry about anything. That has changed over the years. That's changed because of my engagement with Star Wars on a deeper level. The moment my friend, my podcast partner Joseph's like, I don't know, Phantom Menace. What if Amazon had a senator and an army that blockaded Delaware? Wouldn't you find that probably concerning and maybe worth a story?
It's coming up.
Senator from Amazon used to be a joke we told 10 years ago.
Science fiction anymore.
It's not. But as time has gone on and just the people around me, it's not just about standing up and speaking up. It's just about living and existing and seeing where it's going. You were one of the first I saw online. I was like, oh, Dan's going for it. How do you feel we are part of a 80s into 90s, 70s, 80s into 90s culture? We're part of the pop culture dudes, now dudes with beards. How much do you feel you need to speak out even more because of that? Because we are of a certain ilk. Because that's where I'm at, where I'm like, I don't want you to see me and think that. I want to be clear, and I also want to speak to other people like me. If that makes any of this makes sense.
Yeah. So what did it for me was Greg and I actually talk about this a lot.
Okay.
The internet was a pretty amazing thing. It still is.
Still is.
This aspirational thing, what it could be, what it could do, the way it could impact humanity. And we're going to get a little deep and philosophical here,
Love it.
but
do it.
What it could be, the way it has connected us all, and the fact that we do have access to more information and experiences and perspectives than any human in the span of existence, right? And, what are we doing with it? It's entertainment. There is some education out there, but it has not been this sort of great uniter. It has not pushed us as a species, as humanity, to this higher plane of consciousness or realization and self-actualization, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So what it did for me was, being the white kid from the suburbs who grew up, parents in the military, moving around, it built on that experience for me. I was exposed to a lot of different cultures growing up. I lived in New England. I lived in Virginia. I lived in Japan. I lived in Colorado, Florida, I've been all over, and so I saw different lives, different lifestyles. I met different people. I was exposed to lots of different cultures. And for me, the internet and subsequently this show did that even more. It exposed me to other people and their experiences and their shared experience with this stuff.
Right.
All these different walks of life and cultures and whatever neighborhoods and stuff, but they all liked Spider-Man and they all liked Voltron and all of those other things. And so I am here. People know my name and my show because of the audience. I can put it out into the world all I want, but if the audience doesn't give it back to me, I don't have anything. And so you may have heard the "with great power comes great responsibility" line. But I took that to heart. And said, I have this platform because this audience gave it to me. And I feel a responsibility to that audience to stand up and say, I am the person in America right now. I fit the profile of who will be listened to, who is allowed to speak. I am a 50-year-old white man. So I feel an obligation to speak up for my audience, which is a very diverse cross-section of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And so if I'm not using that platform, then I don't feel I deserve it, and I shouldn't have it. And that's sort of and Greg agrees with me. So,
Good. No, that's a big, well said. You said it eloquently there. And I didn't have one particular aha moment. It did start, I always go to the prequels, and this isn't a prequel conversation, but I started in 2014. I had a show with Maude Garrett, Jedi Alliance, and it was a fun weekly Sports Center of Star Wars, and we had TIE Fighter X-Wing, and we would make our jokes about the prequels. And by the way, I still love good Star Wars jokes about the Star Wars that we love.
Absolutely.
But I remember having some people in the audience kind of say, hey, those were our Star Wars things. So that's small at Star Wars. It's not the political, it's not the social stuff. But that was the first time that I had heard the record scratch of, I got it. I'm taking a hammer to something you love. And then that spun out a little bit, and then 2015 is coming. Force Awakens is on the way. Now I'm doing more Star Wars content, and I have a weekly podcast and have that, and then that black and white photo of the cast at the table reading comes out, and we're like, yay! And then some people were like, whoa, hey, where is this type of person? Or how come it's only Carrie Fisher and Daisy? And that's why I could have been the angry car guy. I remember saying on a podcast, oh God, all these people, they need to just wait. The cast, they're going to add to the cast. What's the big problem? And that was an aha moment of this isn't my story. I'm not the only one here in this theater. And as it builds and builds and builds, that's why I really respect what you're all doing over there, but also what you have been saying even kind of inspired me a little bit of like, no. The time for silence is over. and then it's gonna ruffle some feathers, and it's easy just to go, whatever, F off. But was there any? I don't say you didn't have worry about losing audience and anything like that because
no, we absolutely did. We absolutely did.
Okay, yeah, well, yeah,
sure.
because I've
there
had
were those
that.
moments.
Maybe I'm afraid to admit that, Dan.
Yeah, no, there were absolutely those moments, and Greg and I had conversations, and we needed to make sure we were on the same page, both in our sort of political beliefs and our social beliefs about society and government and culture and what all those things should be, and to what degree we were going to let it affect our business, because at the end of the day, it is our source of income. And if you lose too many people, you don't have a business anymore.
Yeah.
And so what did we want to do with that? Now, things have gotten more extreme in the last several years. I would say last 4 years, maybe.
Yeah.
It's specifically 4 years and 15 days based on the calendar.
Yep.
And so that's a sort of constant calculation, like it is one thing to just say, I am who I am, and I don't feel like I should censor myself or be afraid to just speak what I believe the truth of reality is and the facts are, versus, there's some dangerous people out there, and, how far into that do you want to get?
Yeah, I'm glad you answered that wonderfully, because I think I said, we at Force Center, we've been around for 10 years, and as I started to change as a person and kind of all of us aligned on Joseph, Jennifer, and I aligned, what we're doing, we still struggle with how much do we want to lean in. We're talking about covering Andor season 2.
Yeah.
Andor season 2 coming out in spring of 2025 is going to be dangerously and tragically spot on to probably what we're dealing with. And what's the line in which we want to continue having this fun podcast that dives in deep versus there's a real world going on, and it's a concern, and we come down to like how we're going to discuss it versus screaming, yelling, throwing things. How is the value?
Yeah, and you need to sort of take the temperature of your audience and say, maybe this week we're just going to be silly.
Yes.
Maybe this week, we do some more fart jokes than usual, and
more GoBot.
We're not going to take this one. It's not. I don't really have a lot of big, heavy societal implications of, Rubik the Amazing Cube. So we'll just keep this one light.
Yeah.
I don't need to bring this back to, the defund the police or something, or
here's the story on Leader One of GoBots and how, why.
Exactly.
I have found, and I don't know if you're in this boat, but I have found over the last couple of years, and you're talking about, I don't know, January 2021 was, it was a month in which I was like, oh, we really got some stuff we got to deal with here. But I have seen from 2012 to now, that pop culture world just be absolutely infiltrated with those that would like to, oppress others. And it gets masked as silly Star Wars talk. It gets masked as silly Marvel talk. And that's been very eye-opening, number one, when I felt it post Last Jedi on Collider, where I was just like, oh, I like the movie, you didn't? Oh, that's great. And then, one person was like, yeah, why did I have to see Rose and Finn kiss? Like, oh, we're not talking about Star Wars. Got it. Okay. I saw that kind of grow and fester, and it absolutely, from Gamergate, like Gamergate never ended, and it's still going strong. How do you deal with that frustration? How do you deal with, you're covering it in terms of journalism? You answer that question, great, but I still find myself frustrated that I can't get people who love these things to understand what they're about.
I think at a certain point you can't reach people. I hate to give up and say that's a lost cause, but they love lost cause over there. So
there you go. Point for Dan. I'm writing that down. You get one Shelby foot point. There we go.
If you speak the truth, if you say things that are real, if you talk about experiences and people don't want to open up and don't want to relate and don't want to empathize and don't want to fracture their sense of self and their sense of what this media is to them, it's not really your job,
Yeah. Okay.
Talk to the people who are our fans and who are interested. We get people every once in a while, we'll get people, oh, you just lost half your audience. You're everybody. I'm unsubbing from you. And it's like, you're allowed to. Just go ahead.
You're allowed to.
Just go ahead.
You're allowed to for politics, or you're allowed to for, GoBots.
Any reason you want. Your finger slipped. Who cares? You're tired of me. I unsubscribed from channels all the time.
Yeah.
I have never once messaged the person to say I am unsubscribing from your channel. Just do it. Just do it. Who
There is
cares?
always the I am leaving this party person. That is no, yeah, no. I mean, I just feel, yeah, having grown up, and maybe it's not even guilt, but I feel quite frankly stupid sometimes looking back on how much I didn't get what things were about, which I should, look down at myself for that because it just wasn't sold to us as that.
Well, that's part of the problem, and I think you just verbalized what a lot of people, some people, I'm not going to say a lot, what some people have an issue with is they got older and their media, their perception of that media did change, and they just don't want to admit it. They don't want to admit that thing did have that message there, and they still want it to just be about hobbits and orcs and magic swords. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, it's not. And you're an adult now, and you have to come to terms with that.
You got to come to terms with that. Yeah.
And too many people decide to just throw a hissy fit and kick their feet and stamp and
then
I don't know.
And say la vie. No, I think you got a good mindset on it, and you guys have done so well handling it and still growing as a brand, and I really respect that there. And the time I've remaining with you, I want to let you go back to your evening, which is a little later for you on the East Coast here. I still got dinner to look forward to at the time of this recording. Or maybe you two, I don't know, maybe you're like Picasso. Do you have a midnight meal and Paul McCartney's going to write a song about you?
That's right.
You're a sports guy too, though, right?
You know what? Not as much as I used to be. Being in New England, we were, title town for a while there. Yeah. We had Bruins, Celtics, Red Sox, and Patriots just, cheating on all cylinders and,
Yep.
had all the trophies.
Yes.
But after that sort of ended, I'm just like, sports is all about, it's a story. You need to know who the characters are, what the relationships are. It's not just a pitch. This is drama. There's things happening. If he strikes, what happens, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just not in with the characters anymore. So I'm just not following the stories anymore.
Wow, you just actually zeroed on something wonderful there. I am getting back into it. I'm a Miami Dolphin fan. Okay. I'm a New York Yankee fan. I'm a California Yankee and Dolphin fan.
Oh, you're a Yankee fan? I'm sorry. I have to let you go.
Yeah, apologize. Yeah. Though, I watched that doc on the 2004 comeback, and I was rooting for the Red Sox 20 years after. But I'm just getting back into it because I'm allowing myself to get back into it in a way I hadn't, because I kind of took this 2014 Star Wars is what I talk about every week, and pop culture is what I talk about, and I just kind of disconnected, and I didn't really understand why. You just touched upon it, because I always say, it's even in my stand-up act, it's the same thing. Rooting for Luke Skywalker, LeBron James, same thing. It's these mythic heroes, but I stopped paying attention to the characters after a while. After the Yankees won so many times,
the stories work. Yeah,
didn't connect. That's so funny. That's fascinating.
We went to it's the term fan comes from fanatic, which is not a good thing. It's not. That's not like we fanatic.
Yeah.
My dad growing up, my older brother, he's the sports guy. Like I'm the comics, video games guy. He's the sports guy, right? Like he's still, Celtics are like his, live and die by the Celtics thing. Everything else is kind of fallen by the wayside, but it's still Celtics. But growing up, he was a big Cowboys fan. We lived in New England for most of our life, but he was a Cowboys fan for whatever reason. He just, front runner, who knows, whatever. He was 10 years old. He didn't know any better.
They are America's team. All right.
Right, they were. Yeah. I mean, but at the time we were on vacation in Pennsylvania, and the Cowboys were playing the Eagles, and my dad had gotten us all tickets to go to the game. And so we're at a Cowboys at Eagles game in Philadelphia in like 1987,
Oh, yeah.
And my dad almost killed a man that day because the Eagles, because my brother is like 12 years old. He's wearing a Dallas Cowboys hat, and the Cowboys are beating the Eagles.
Yeah.
And he's going, yay, Cowboys. Yeah, and this guy, who's probably like our age, then.
Oh, no.
Takes the hat off my 12-year-old brother. And I thought I was going to watch my dad kill a man that day.
My dad's going away.
But who does that? Who takes it so seriously? A football game so seriously that you got to rip a hat off a kid's head who's having a good day.
One of the reasons I did start to pull out of sports too wasn't just because I started focusing professionally on other things. It was I got tired of a lot of the fandom in sports. I got tired of the pre-games. I just didn't just play the damn game. I don't care about it. But it was a little bit of that. And look, the sports world, generally speaking, I don't politically align with a lot of people watching them there. I'll be clear about that. But I started to pull away from that, and I was like, I'm gonna go. Finally, I was the nerd that got beat up in school, choked by the school bully for wearing a Return of the Jedi shirt and everything. I'm going to go to the nerds. And then I started to discover that the nerds sometimes might even be worse on some levels.
Yeah.
And I retreated back. It was like that Simpsons episode where they go make a film and then they escape back from, Hollywood. But fascinating. It's all the same though. It is stories and characters.
All connected.
Before I let you go though, I don't want to put you on the spot, Dan, but I saw you post something today on Blue Sky, or at least last couple of days. The last few days have all rolled into one horrible set of hours. You pulled out some old drawings of yours that you made and that you put away in a desk drawer years ago because you didn't think they were good. And now you're looking at them thinking, why did I stop? They were good. You still have time to do your great comic book. Are you going to do this?
Oh, hell yeah.
Where's your art going to go? I want to know. I'm not making you commit. I just want to know.
One of the trade-offs, one of those like milestone moments that would be in the documentary film about my life was the moment I had to sit down and say, what is art to me, and how am I going to express myself in this world? And the YouTube channel and the show and the audience and all of that stuff, the universe was telling me, this is how you're going to do it.
Yeah.
The comics are there, and if you need to come back to that at some point, you can always have that outlet. But if you take the time away from comics that you've been putting into that and put it into this, then you may actually have something here that not only can be financially viable, but might actually allow you to express yourself to the world.
Okay. This is great.
Look at this guy. Look at this professional interviewer here.
But I'm a little off my game tonight, probably because I haven't had dinner. I'm stumbling for words. You're eloquent, you're smart, and you're great. You should run for office. I'm not saying that because you're Teflon and you're avoiding it. You're answering spot on, wonderfully and inspirationally. I love hearing this stuff. I just saw that today, or whatever you posted it. I just laughed because the amount of screenplays I've buried or stand-up bits I didn't work, and just us as artists or just humans, our ability to shrink back from something that might actually have been good and come back to it later and go, man, why did I do that? It continues to.
It's so hard to just be yourself. It's just hard to be yourself, Like at that point, I was judging myself by artists who were making, tens of thousands of dollars per book, and Steven Spielberg. I'm not as good as Steven Spielberg. Like, no, it's okay. You know who is? Nobody else.
No one else. It's one of my big lessons for me to put into play this year. I've talked a lot on my podcast feed about believing that you belong. And there's been a lot of times in my stand-up career where I walk into a green room and I just don't believe I belong there. When, I drive home going, I think I do. So why don't I believe it? And I think that's what you're talking about too. Finding your voice. You have found a wonderful way to express yourself and do some important work with some silly things. And I really respect what you're doing. Dan, thanks for hanging out tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me here. It's been too long. I'm glad we finally got to hook up.
I'm glad we finally do this. Like I said, from fanboy to interviewer, I really enjoyed it. And next time I'm out that way, maybe we can do some, do they like to laugh in New Hampshire? Maybe we can swing that way.
Ooh, mostly, I guess.
Okay. Different kind of heat?
Closer to Boston.
Okay. I was just in Boston. My first trip to Boston was last year, and I loved it. The whole town's a pub, so maybe we'll just go a little more up to New Hampshire.
Awesome.
Before we get out of here, though, I'll have links down below as always. But for those listening on the audio podcast, Dan, tell them where you want them to find and maybe consider supporting.
Always, we're Secret Galaxy. You can find us on YouTube. New episodes go up mostly every Thursday at 5:00 Eastern time. We're also on Patreon and Blue Sky.
Love it. Yep. Same for me. Blue Sky's kind of my home right now. See where everything else settles. That's it. Check out Secret Galaxy. Check out Dan Larson. Give him a follow. Say hello. And let's make him force him chase his dreams as a comic book artist. I'm kidding. Guys, thanks for listening, everyone. Catch you next time here on The Blathering.